What would you do with this song if you were playing it? Just try to give him something. Well, that turned into the wrong thing. I got in trouble with that.
I went out and took Brian's place with the Beach Boys. And I can understand probably why Brian had studio guys come in, because there's a lot of them would fight like cats and dogs, man. Rather than Brian to go through the hassle to get the tracks, he would hire the rhythm section to come in and do the tracks.
Well, the guys, they at first they were a little jealous, you know what I mean? But I explained to them, I said, you know, I want to get the best I can get for the group. And they go, well, I can understand your point, Brian, you know? So we went ahead and did it, and sure enough, the guys liked it.
I mean, that's one of the most asked questions. Well, didn't Dennis get mad? Wasn't he mad because you were doing the Beach Boys records? Dennis did not have the studio chops that we had. Yeah. You know, right. The proof of the pudding is that Dennis called me to do his album when Dennis did his solo album. I played the drums on it.
A lot of times the guys would be sitting around the studio and we didn't know that there were guys in the band. The guitar players that were in these various groups, when they realized guys like Tommy Tedesco was going to be playing, they wanted to sit around and watch. And the drummers would want to sit around and watch myself or Al. They were there like more or less they were learning. You know, it would be something that I'd like to see too if it had been the other way around.
Terry Melcher wanted to use session musicians for Mr. Tambourine Man. I'd been a studio musician in New York prior to being in the Byrds, so they let me play on it. So my feeling was, great, I get to play with this great band, the Wrecking Crew. Of course, the other guys, David Crosby and Michael Clark and Chris Hillman, were livid. They hated the idea because they didn't get to play on their own record. We got a #1 hit with it right off the bat, but we knocked out 2 tracks in 1 3-hour session. To compare that with what happened when the rest of the band got to play, it took us 77 takes to get the band track for Turn, 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 which was also #1.
People assume that just because my dad made his living playing guitar, I can also play. For me, and some of the other kids as studio musicians, we didn't take it up as a profession. What my father did teach us was common sense.
I got called many years ago. I show up on this date, now there's 70 musicians sitting there. I'm looking, I said, 70 musicians, wow. Where I sit? And they said, over there, there's a guitar. You know, I sit there. Now I look at a part. The only problem is started at bar 95, you know. And all the rest. Now the guy starts, right? And you know what this is to me at the time? This is in a nightclub. You know, you see a chick. Hey, there she is. Hey. But when he did this and there was no music, I said, they're at bar 95. I knew it. Guitar, where's the guitar? Over here. We're at 95. I didn't hear you. Oh, okay. You know, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, forget it. Let's go from 96. And they had somebody come in the next day to do it. Elvis Presley came back there a few years, and I started getting hot in records, and Elvis started using me when he come to the coast for movies. So nobody told Elvis who to use. To that day, I never knew if they knew I was the same guy, though. Yeah. But I wasn't about to tell them, you remember me 3 years ago? I'm the guy. See, the one thing, I have common sense. I studied common sense more than I did guitar.
In the 60s, the Wrecking Crew played on thousands of recordings, but you would never have known it.
Producers made a big mistake when they didn't put the credits on the back of the albums of all the people that had played on the albums. Not only did they deserve it, but I think it was misleading.
Maybe one of the reasons they left the names off was the same musicians played on so many people's records, it would have been an embarrassment if anybody had ever listed them.
I was used to it. Because when a guy hired me with his last $25 and he had a bomb, I never give him his money back. Right. You know, and so I really treated it as a business. And I understand how you feel, too. But I just felt, just give me my money, and I got lost.
Everybody loves a clown, so why can't Snuffy always let myself and the Playboys lay down all the basic tracks. And then Snuff said, now we're going to sweeten it and do some overdubs and stuff, and I'm going to bring in the people that I want to use. And I had no experience in this, and Snuffy had. So I said, well, great. If you think that's the way to do it, let's do it.
The drummer came in, but Snuffy let him, play some kind of percussion like a tambourine. So it could say Gary Lewis and the Playboys. But it was really studio guys that made the track.
And I remember my guitar player and our keyboard player, after hearing the session musicians coming in and putting down the parts, they were saying, oh my God, I never could have done anything like that.
I'll never forget working with Gary Lewis and his Playboys doing all the record.
Sure.
And I'll never forget I had one real hot lick on this one record, Spanish stuff all over the place.
Guess you could say my love was blind.
And finally, his guitar player come up to me. He says, oh, you drove me crazy with that thing. First of all, I can't play it, so I don't play it. And then everybody comes up to me complimenting me on what I did on it. I said, well, just take the compliments and forget it.
So all my guitar players played a much simplified version of it, because nobody could play that.
That was inside stuff. I think that the public at large was oblivious to the fact that there was this secret star maker machinery, that a very important component of that were these teams like hitmen, studio hitmen.
Nobody cared. All they wanted was the product. They just wanted the name and the sales. Who created it? That was incidental.
Tell them your story, Hal, about the Monkees, because the newspapers came in to talk to them, and we were in the next studio cutting their stuff, and then they were pretending that they were doing a date there in the studios.
Well, you just
Tell
told
them the story.
Well, you told the story. Did you get it?
I've never considered myself a musician. To me, a musician is someone who does session work, who shows up and reads charts. And I always approached the Monkees as an actor playing the part of a drummer in this imaginary group that lived in this imaginary beach house and had these imaginary adventures. To me, that's always been what it's about. Peter does tell the story of going into some of the early sessions, and he walked in with his guitar and his bass, and they said, what are you doing here? And he said, I'm supposed to play. And they said, just go home, relax.
1, 2, 3, 4.
You like it? That's terrible. That's the worst thing.
I had no idea who these guys were in these early sessions. It was my first session. And I was introduced to them. These are the musicians. I was the vocalist. I remember Hal Blaine giving me some pointers in the sessions, and Earl Palmer would give me some pointers. But I didn't have to play at that point. They said, you're going to start drum lessons on Monday. And I did. And I had about a year. So by the time I had to actually play on stage live, I wasn't that bad. I mean, I only had to play our songs, obviously. And they were pretty simple pop tunes. Hal and Earl do this stuff with one hand in their sleep. The fans, they didn't know or care. And I was like, what's the deal? This is a television show. What is the big deal? But, back then and even to this day, a lot of people take the rock and roll very seriously. And it's, rock and roll is no laughing matter. You're not supposed to have fun. It has to be very serious.
I don't think there was any backlash to the discovery that the Monkees didn't play their own instruments initially, because everybody knew it was common practice.
I saw them in everybody's session. I remember in RCA Victor going to the Mamas and Papas who were next door, and there was Hal Blaine, and then he'd come over and do one of our sessions, and then off to do somebody else, I guess. I knew they played on virtually all the Beach Boy records. We got a lot of shit for it, but I think finally you know, some of those guys are coming clean.
Barry McGuire had found this song called California Dreamin' that he wanted to record, and these four kind of scruffy-looking two guys and two girls came to the studio because Barry wanted them to sing background parts on his record. And he said to Lou, they're a great-sounding vocal group. You should hear them sing. John Phillips wrote this song, California Dreamin'. So while the band was on a 10, Lou and I went down the hall to Studio 2 with the four of them, and John had a guitar, and they sang California Dreamin'. Lou said, "What do you think?" And I said, "If you don't take them, I will," you know.
After hearing their vocals, their background vocals, I thought it should be their record. When I started to do the Mamas and Papas, I put Joe Osborne in that group with Hal Blaine.
And that's when Hal and Larry and myself worked together as a group for the first time. I wasn't really busy at that point. I wasn't busy as a studio player. And Hal helped me get into that area.
Those kinds of combinations of what Joe brought to Hal Blaine and what Hal Blaine brought to Joe Osborne was great.
Monday, Monday.
In the case of the Mamas and Papas, John Phillips would run the song down on rhythm guitar. At the same time, Hal would be taking notes, Glenn Campbell might be taking notes, and then we say, okay, let's run it down. They had parts in mind so that you could then edit. Yeah, that's good, let's keep it. That's not, can you try something else? But they had a lot to do with the arrangements.
Producers presented the musicians with a roadmap, or it was just chord symbols, and that was about as far as it went. Now, these musicians took that information and, added a little flavor to it that was unexpected. A lot of times it was, much more than you had hoped for.
People come up and say, did you do this? Would you work with this group? I said, I don't remember. Well, I saw your name on the album. Then I did. That's because you work so much, you have no idea.
The studio players in 1999, they would, if they're not playing all the time, they would need to do what we never needed to do, was practice. All the time you're practicing while being paid.
It's funny, Earl and I were talking one time, it's like, you couldn't judge anybody by how much they were working because everybody's working all the time. You had to just go by how much work you turned down.
Most of us were so fortunate to have been in at the original beginnings of rock and roll.
For Christ's sake, I made more money playing rock and roll than I ever made playing jazz.
There was one point in the mid-'60s that I was making more money than the President of the United States.
I remember I used to kid Carol. I says, you realize, Carol, if I got a divorce and we could get married, and what a year we'd have of money. Between all your money and my money, we'd be killing everybody.
Including each other.
This is where we did Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr. We did everybody in there. It's just an amazing place.
In my particular case, I bought an incredible mansion in Hollywood. I had a magnificent yacht. I had a gorgeous Rolls Royce. But out of nowhere, I had a wife who all of a sudden declared, I want a divorce. What? What are you talking about? I just went for a sandwich and it's like impossible to believe. And in order for her to get paid off, you sell everything you own. I had 170-something gold records, had to sell them all. The house was sold for a third of what it was worth. I had to let the yacht go. The yacht was repossessed. Never had anything repossessed in my life. It's just a shame to get wiped out that seriously. I had been working with John Denver, almost $5,000 a week for almost 10 years. And all of a sudden, that job ended. Terrible, terrible thing to have to go through. I mean, you certainly, in the realm of suicide, you certainly think about it. I was working in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I was a security guard, plain and simple. Here I went from all this money and this magnificent estate and everything else involved, and all of a sudden I was reduced to living in a clothes closet. Came out of about 23 rooms in Hollywood, and it was like the end of the world. This was Gold Star. So this is it. This is what's left. And it was an amazing time, and it was such a historical place. They had a lot of first-time big-hit people to come here and make their records. Cross Street, we recorded the Captain and Tennille doing Love Will Keep Us Together. Boy, they had a #1. It was Record of the Year that year. It was my last Record of the Year. I had heard that things were picking up again, 82, 83, something like that. And then I was also getting a few calls. All of a sudden I was working again. One of the great highlights was when I was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So in the year 2000, me and Earl Palmer were both inducted. Earl was just, I can't thank him enough. Earl recommending me in the beginning, it made a name for myself. It really was that simple. I've always said, if you love your work, it's not work. We loved our work, man. That's how we could work day and night, because we loved it.
I'll never forget a session we was all doing with Don Costa. And I start playing rhythm, and he stopped and he said, "Glenn, you got the lead there." And boy, I said, "Mr. Costa," I said, "I can't read notes." He said, "Well, you know the melody, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, that's the melody." I said, "Oh, okay, great."
He would ask Tedesco, "How does that figure go or this figure go?"
Right, exactly.
And then he would sit there and work it out, and we'd make the records, and it was always perfect.
Yeah, well, he had a certain thing that he offered that they wanted.
Wonderful ear and a wonderful facility on the instrument.
Glenn came up with great ideas. And his solos were just super. And then all of a sudden he's a singing star. Well, he always could sing. We used to kid him about, he's standing up and singing now. He's going to be a big star. But he became a big star.
Well, it's knowing that your door is always open and the path is free to walk. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Glenn Campbell.
I mixed actually the first record, that record that he made for Capitol. I mixed that record. And it was like a really surprise to see him come in and say, "I'm singing on this record. I'm going to, And the record was a hit, and his vocal career was launched.
And when he got out and became a singing star, guess who he called to back him up?
That's right.
We were all there for him.
I remember Tedesco playing on, I forget what it was. He said, "You still talking to us peons?" I said, "Well, some of them." But that was great having the guys do the sessions. I knew who all the good players were.
Playing Wichita Lineman, it had a chord chart. I don't think it had any part written.
She came up with da-da-da-da-da, blah, She said, "How about this for a kickoff on Wichita Lineman?" And she came up with that.
I am a lineman for the county.
Glenn Campbell was a heck of a guitar player, and I had this Dano bass guitar that had special pickups and bridge and strings on it, and got a really great gutty sound, and he picked it up and did the solo on it. It was great. I heard Wichita Lineman at a drugstore one time, and it just brought tears to my eye because that tune meant a lot to me.
And I want you for all time. And the Wichita Lineman is still on the line.
I did all that early Glenn Campbell stuff, all of it, up to Southern Nights, when he changed producers and I didn't do anymore. Glenn, by this time, was trying to record using his own band. I'm sitting in Martoni's one night there in Hollywood, and Steve Turner, his drummer, walked in. And he said, "You're not going to believe what just happened." "What?" And he said, "I'm just coming from the session with Glenn, and they're trying to get this kid to play some decent rhythm guitar." Glenn says, "Well, give me that big, full Al Casey sound." I said, "Does he know that I'm available tonight?" You know, but I understand he's trying to use his own band. But when stuff like that starts happening, that's a signal.
I think a lot of us felt this just might go on forever. And that was the first great shock for many of us who had setbacks in our careers and realized that, hey, this is an up-down thing.
Sports figures seem to have a 10-year period when it all happens for them. So what you get is you get the ramp up, you get 10 great years, and you get the ramp down. And the trick is to make the ramp down last as long as you possibly can.
Who would hire me at my age then to be in a rock group? They weren't doing that anymore because now the rock guys were doing their stuff and writing, which they always did, but they were able to perform it.
As Dylan said, the times they are a-changing. It just changed. New game, new way of doing it.
I don't think it was a conscious decision that, you know, these musicians play a certain way, now we better get more contemporary. In my case, it had to do with the artist, or who the artist brought with him. In the case of Carole King, she brought a rhythm section with her. She brought James Taylor on guitar.
I think the bands learned to play. It was more important for the public to know that the bands were really playing the music.
You had these groups that came up in the late 60s and into the 70s, the Buffalo Springfield, that became Crosby, Stills, and Nash. And these were all self-contained groups that, for the most part, never used studio musicians. And those things became huge, and that's where album artists became really big.
We all went into it knowing it could stop any second.
It was never meant to last. It was just this like magical bubble that just kind of blossomed for a second, hung there in the air. Hal plays on 7 records of the year in a row. 7 in a row. And then the bubble pops.
It's new people. It's a new regime. We came in at a certain time when we were all new. All the new people are coming in now when they are new. Young, vibrant, playing today's sounds. It's that simple.
As the record dates with the Wrecking Crew diminished, my father was one of the more fortunate musicians. His versatility, combined with his ability to read music in seconds, led to thousands of recordings in film and television. He worked with some of the greatest composers in American music: John Williams, Jerry Goldsmith, Henry Mancini, Bill Conti, James Horner, Burt Bacharach, Lalo Schifrin, just to name a few. In the 70s, my father started playing for his own enjoyment. It was the first time I remember seeing him at home with the guitar.
He got into doing seminars, and that's what he really enjoyed. He was flying around the country, and he arranged his seminars on weekends so that he could be home during the week in case there was any calls.
Let me give you what I call the creative studio guitar player. About a year ago, I got the call to do a John Denver special. It was John Denver in Mexico, and they wanted some, he was on a fishing vessel, and they wanted some Mexican music, so I gave him this. Got a call to Charlie's Angels. They were in Puerto Rico. They wanted Puerto Rican music, so I gave them this. Starsky and Hutch was in a big revolt in Bolivia on one show. They wanted Bolivian music.
In 1975, my father, in jest, wrote a song called Requiem for a Studio Guitar Player.
I used to be number one. I did all the work in L.A.
Always looking to carry a joke a little further, my dad dressed up as a 280-pound ballerina and went on the Gong Show.
I used to be number one. I did all the work in this town.
You should think about what he's saying in the lyrics to his song. Don't dwell on the costume too much, because it tells a lot about the way the business in this town works. And for being a person with a sense of humor, I think Tommy's had to put up with a lot of really stupid things.
In the 50s, I was something. In the 60s, I was a king. The 70s come around. Now I'll do anything.
It was not until I tracked these musicians down to tell their story that I fully understood Frank Zappa's words. In 1992, my father had a stroke that pretty much ended his career as a guitarist. 2 months before my father passed away, he said to me, "You know, the stroke came at the right time in my life." I knew exactly what he meant. The phone had stopped ringing, and his day as the Los Angeles Session King had come to an end. Now he had an excuse as to why the phone didn't ring. It was something he had no control over. If I learned anything from my father, it was to give more than you take. He loved his family and friends and would always help the younger guitar players, knowing it was only a matter of time that they soon would take his place, just like he took someone else's seat 40 years earlier.
Each night before you go to bed, my baby, whisper a little prayer for me, my baby, and then all stars above. This is dedicated to the one I love. 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 This is dedicated.
Everybody's talking at me. I don't hear words they're saying, only the echoes of my mind.
Pretty soon all my troubles will pass, 'cause I'm in shoo-shoo-shoo, shoo-shoo-shoo.
Everybody find somebody someplace.
This is the moment we've been waiting for. With 30 points, the winner today is Hot Dog Tommy Tedesco.
GMC's tramps and thieves, we hear it from the people of the town. They call us GMC's tramps and thieves.
It's the little old lady from Pasadena.
And here's to you, Mrs. Robinson. Jesus loves you more than you will know. Whoa, whoa, whoa. God bless you, please, Mrs. Robinson. Heaven holds a place for those who pray. Hey, hey, hey. Hey, hey, hey. Cherokee people, Cherokee tribe.